Well, welcome, Sue, to the Flower Podcast again.
Thank you so much, Scott. Happy to be here once more.
I know. It's like we were just chatting, and I just hadn't realized this is your fourth time on the podcast, and it's like so much has happened this year, and it was great seeing you at AIFD symposium and your amazing stage presentation you did, and just catching
Thank you.
up and see what's going on new in the world of passion flower Sue.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Sure. So I know that for all of our listeners, if we're going to put a link so that way, if you want to hear any of the past episodes with Sue, you'll be able to go back and hear all of her stories and things from the past. So this is going to be a really exciting time because I always when I follow you on Instagram and we have a chance to catch up, I'm always just fascinated of so many of the things that you have going on. And so I know I noticed looking at your Instagram that you've got some workshops and things coming up. Why don't you share kind of what's coming up this year?
Yeah, back out into the world, which still feels strange and great. Um, yeah, I have several. I have a workshop coming up in March, early March in Seoul, Korea, actually.
Oh my goodness.
That's rescheduled from 2020. Because last year, actually the last 2 years were still kind of iffy there in March. So we're going to do it this year with Sasson Fleury, a beautiful floral school that I've been following for several years. So that's happening. And then in April, I have a workshop with Whipstone Farm and Crystal Whitaker and Jordan Manny, who are like branding coaches, wellness coaches, lifestyle improvers. They're just like amazing, brilliant women who I've done coaching with in Arizona in April. And then I have a workshop on Nantucket. It's hard to say Nantucket, but I'm going to practice with Hafsa and Co. Wonderful woman Hafsa, who is a florist out on Nantucket with several other teachers as well. So quite a few things happening this spring.
That's awesome. That's incredible.
Hmm.
And then of course the big thing that's coming up, you have a new book coming out.
I do. Yeah. This little baby.
Yeah, Flowers for
Yeah.
All. That's amazing.
Flowers for All. Yeah. It comes out February 7th. Yeah, it's really exciting. So I'm in the thick of all the planning to launch this little book off into the world. There's lots of planning that goes into that. So
Sure.
that's kind of what I'm focused on this month.
Sure. So tell us a little bit about this latest book, because the other one, Wearables, that sort of that kind of explained itself. So what is Flowers for All?
Yeah, so I'm working with the same publisher, Chronicle Books, and they do a lot of lifestyle and cookbooks, which I love. If I wasn't a florist, I would definitely be a chef. Um, so thinking about kind of, who they're speaking to like a wide audience, and they wanted me to do that for florists. Or I'm sorry, do that for flower lovers. So the book is really meant to give anyone who's, a floral enthusiast, a gardener, somebody who just loves to buy a bunch of flowers every week when they go shopping, all the way up to florists and enthusiasts, give them lots of really accessible ideas to bring flowers into their homes more often and design for themselves, for their friends, and for small parties. So the book is sectioned out into three different chapters. There's flowers for me, so little things you might do for yourself for your own enjoyment,
Mhm.
which I do all the time. Even as a florist, I definitely bring like little special tidbits in for myself. And then it moves up to larger projects, things you might make for a small gathering or a gift for a
Right.
friend. And then all the way up to larger displays you would do for like a small party in your home or in your studio or even for a wedding or an event.
So is it
Yeah.
full of cutting edge Sue McLeary fun stuff? Is it
It's
Is
okay, so it's meant to be accessible. So kind of the things that I do when I'm just enjoying flowers in my home. So there's a lot of just putting flowers in a vase or
sure,
even like floating them in a shallow bowl. And then there's a few more fun techniques. Yeah.
sure,
So I have like a flower crown of threaded daffodil crown coronas. There's a floral pillar. There's there's a garland technique. There's several, but overall it's meant to be just really accessible. So you could go anywhere and get flowers. I even work with things like, geranium from the market down the street and just everyday flowers and kind of try to give them a moment to encourage people. They don't have to buy something really exotic or hard to find to have a special moment with flowers. They can do
right.
that with anything that they have access to.
Right. Yeah. Well,
Kind
I
of the
feel,
idea.
yeah. Well, I feel like a lot of times it's neat to have something like this kind of a book that's a little bit for everybody.
Yeah.
And sometimes too, it's like, sometimes things help people progress and maybe find a new love or a new passion for them. So
Hmm.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
Um,
My
yeah.
There was two kind of things I was thinking about. Um, there's so many beautiful floral design books. I mean, I have like hundreds, hundreds of them, but they can feel like picture yourself, just a young person living in the city, for instance, and you see these books and you think to yourself, I don't have acres to walk around and
Right.
pluck beautiful, fronds from. I have concrete and I have, a bodega down the street or whatever it is. Um, I felt like I wanted to offer something for that person who doesn't have access to a lot of green spaces
Right.
and show ideas to still bring like that tranquility inside. Um, so there was that. And then also the feelings I got around COVID when I didn't have access to what I wanted, and just that feeling that I had to sit with like, there's nothing to buy right now. And I desperately want to work with flowers. So I ended up going to Trader Joe's, because I could justify that. So that feeling of like still having hope and feeling like joyful, even when I didn't have uh, a lot of access to natural materials.
Yeah. But it's interesting because every now and then I get these wild hairs and I don't have many hairs left, so I have to hang on to even the wild ones. And um I'll be walking in a big box store. I'll be I don't know, just walking, from A to B and see a landscape or driving by and I'll see something and it catches my eye. And a lot of times this happens like I'm in a garden center and I see this happened last year where I saw this beautiful
Mhm.
phlox and I'm like, okay, I'm determined to figure out something to do with that. And that's the
Yes.
thing is it doesn't have to be pre-packaged, the official bouquet you get at the local grocery store. It can literally be anything that
Hmm.
inspires you. And it happened to be a flower and a color. And before I knew it, I didn't spend a lot of money, but I planted, I bought these cool, containers of plants and then did a few things design wise with them, and then I planted them in the garden. Or planted them actually in a raised pot that I had that has a lot of different things in it. And I thought, how fun! You get to enjoy it now, enjoy it later,
Hmm.
and it doesn't have to be something super difficult. So
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of those kinds of projects in the book for
yeah,
certain. Yeah.
that's awesome. That's great. So it comes out when again?
February 7th.
So you can probably pre-order it anywhere.
You can, yes. So I will be talking about pre-order a lot. So instead of doing a book launch party for this second book, I'm doing a giveaway that's really fun actually, and it's
Oh,
giving me an excuse to stretch this other idea I have about making garments. So I'm having several garments made. I took the flower photography, I manipulated made a print and then had fabric made, and the garments are being made by a seamstress friend of mine down the street. She's one of my good friends, and I'm giving several of these away as a fun kind of gesture, to launch this book off correctly. So that's what I'm doing.
How
Everybody who
fun.
pre-orders the book will receive a free tutorial that kind of coincides with a few of the projects in the book, but then they'll also be entered to win one of these garments. So yeah,
Well,
I'll have a link. I'll give you a link.
yeah, do that. Well, I know from when back in July at Vegas when you did your presentation, I want to say there was several
Mhm.
garments you created out
Yes.
of different patterns and things, and I was like, wow, this is a side of Sue McLeary I haven't seen yet, and it was wonderful. I loved how sort of colorful and simple and subtle, but yet just amazing they were. So
Thank you.
I thought they were really special. How many different patterns have you created?
Oh gosh, I probably have about 12 that I've tested and had made into fabric, but I'm very new at this whole
Sure.
kind of world. I've always loved fashion, always, but I know nothing about construction, so I'm working with my seamstress friend, and I know
Mhm.
very little about photography. So I with each print, it gets a little bit better, a little bit crisper, a little bit, a better result. But it's something I'd like to explore. I think there's so many ways to be a florist, quote unquote, and to express yourself through flowers. And this is just another thing that I'm exploring, making some large scale artwork with these prints, and then also making some garments. So this is just a good excuse to have some excitement around the book, and get some of these things out in the world and stretch the idea a little bit further.
Sure. Do you ever find that when you I love that word, you stretch these ideas, do they spawn new ideas or do you feel like, "Oh, I'm out here without a safety net. What am I doing?"
Um, I think my personality is that I'm always stretching things and then getting distracted with whatever comes of that stretching because it does turn into
Uh-huh.
another interest usually. But I try to circle back and like, don't go too far off track, like complete an idea and then explore a new idea. I do try. Um, but yeah, I guess I have a lot of uh little wild hairs to explore, like you.
I don't have that many wild hairs left. So that's funny. Well, speaking of wild hairs, I know that I'm always amazed at what you find, and I don't know. Maybe this is your way of trying to create um, more sustainable design work, but I feel like probably about a year ago, and I don't know if we talked about this personally or not, but I you were doing things with tumbleweeds,
Mhm.
and I was like, what is she thinking? I'm like, what is? I'm like, there, but it was so cool. And then recently, you had this bullwhip. Is it bullwhip kelp? Is that how you say it?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and I was like, here she goes again. I'm like, how do you find out about these things? And what's going on? What's going on, Sue? Tell us the scoop.
What's going on? I don't know what's going on. I think I'm trying to like remember where this kind of spark came from, and I'm not really sure. I think I really enjoy the process of trying to find solutions for problems that have felt so just insidious in our industry for so long. So I'm really driven to find, more sustainable mechanics, for instance, or all natural mechanics.
Yeah.
It's just something that really makes me so just so curious and so interested. So, yeah, I stick flowers into everything I find. If there's something that looks like it could hold a flower, I stick a flower in there and not they're not always successful experiments, but I've always been kind of a tinkerer and experimenter, um, curious maybe to a fault, but I stick flowers in anything that will hold flowers. And then I share the findings that I feel
Right.
are useful. However, the more, I share some of these things before I have the full picture. And tumbleweeds, for instance, do contain a ton of seeds and they are really invasive,
Mm.
kind of nasty plant.
Right.
So, there's some limitations to some of these findings. I think they make an incredible chicken wire replacement because they have all these little laterals and you can just stick stems right in or through them into a water source. And it's just an amazing thing. But you have to give the whole story that, they need to be either neutralized or steam um, sterilized, or at least the seed shaken off before they're shipped, around the country. So yeah, I'd like find something that seems like it solves a problem and then it usually causes more problems. And then I have to like dig further, like, okay, so the problem there is the seed.
Right.
What's similar to this? What did I love about this material that I maybe can find another thing that doesn't have this issue, um, that can, still solve the design problem that I'm trying to address. So that turns into more experimenting and, looking at different materials and things.
So it's hard for me to imagine tumbleweeds becoming invasive in Michigan, but I guess it's
I
possible.
know, I know. And yeah, I don't have the science background, the horticulture background to know if that's really an issue. And there's so
Right.
many things that are invasive in the South where you are that wouldn't
Exactly.
last a winter here. Think Nandina and, even porcelain vine.
Yeah.
We have it here, but it's definitely not a problem. It's really isolated.
Yeah.
So yeah, but you have to be,
You have to
I'm
think big
told you
picture.
have yes, yes. And, if you're talking to people from around the world, you have to be sensitive to, you know,
Right.
everybody's different climates and so on. So,
Right. No, and that's
yeah.
completely responsible. And I know that's one thing that you and I spoke about before. It's just, trying to be responsible about that. And, sometimes, like you said, you find a structure that works really interestingly. Now, maybe there's something else similar that doesn't have that quality to it, that invasive quality.
Hmm.
I think that's interesting. I know one of the things I saw you use, and I may have even seen this in Vegas, was mushrooms, using
Hmm.
mushrooms. And I know you've used those before. How do those end up working out?
Yeah. So for me, the mushroom, it's mostly decorative. It's just like a beautiful addition to a tablescape or a arrangement. But I did play with this snow fungus that's a really interesting, like gelatinous, like 6-inch in diameter, kind of spherical,
Sure.
cool fungus, really cool. And it's white and really ruffly and pretty. So what I found is if I make like a little branch armature and perch the snow fungus on that, I can guide my flowers through the snow fungus and they'll hit the water source in the vase, and
Hello.
it can be a really nice like stabilizing mechanic. So you could leave some of it uncovered and kind of have these little ruffles peeking out and have a really cool arrangement. And the flowers still have a really nice water source. Or you can place them in a like shallow dish, for instance, and arrange some flowers right into them, and they hold, but some of the flowers don't get enough hydration. So it's not like a hydration answer. It's more decorative and stabilizing. So
Sure.
not a foam replacement.
Right. It's more
But I
like a.
definitely went down that rabbit hole. That was a real rabbit hole, and I had a lot of fun. Yeah.
Well, when I saw it, I thought, well, that's interesting. And then, I've shared this before on the podcast. It's been a while, I think. And I'm gonna. I don't know if have you ever tried watermelon?
I've seen that, and I think it's a great idea. I haven't played with it myself, but I think it's a good one.
I had a customer. that had a request where they had to do this funeral, and the whole piece they said everything about this has to be compostable. That was
Hmm.
the challenge, and she ended up using watermelon. And
Great.
again, it's not gonna. It didn't have to last a week.
Hmm.
It's not like a regular floral design. It's for a short term event, if you will.
Hmm.
And it really it was amazing once I saw what it did, and
Hmm.
I thought, And I've seen people do that, like on TV shows, like I think one of the HBO floral shows, competitions. Someone did it, and I think it's kind of like probably with the mushrooms for you that some flowers that really drink a lot, maybe not a great fit,
Hmm.
but flowers that maybe don't, they just need a short-lived water source is not so bad. But anyway, it was
Right.
interesting. So I've got to hear. Do people just send you stuff like this bullwhip kelp? Do they just say Sue will try anything and they send it to you, or did you actually find it?
Well, a friend of mine saw this reel. There's this company called Barnacle Foods in Alaska. They're adorable. They're all young and like fit, cute,
Yep.
um, yeah, hip like kelp farmers in
Uh-huh.
Alaska. And they were harvesting this bullwhip, and it's just so cool. It can be like 16 feet long, and
Wow.
the tubes can be like 3 inches in diameter.
Really?
Yeah, and so they're in the boat and they're harvesting this and they're like taking bites out of it. And my friend sent it to me and said, "I thought you would like this." And I was like, "Oh, I really do." So my first thought was, "Oh, this could be like a water tube replacement. Like
Yeah.
picture sections cut, and then you could fashion it into like a U shape and tie it into an installation, pour water in, and then you could have flowers on both ends." Because I'd been playing with plastic tubing from the hardware store to do that. So I thought, oh, that's so cool. So I found a kelp forager on Etsy, and I ordered a case of kelp. But when it came, it was really, really tiny, like too
Mm.
small to put flowers in. And it dries really quickly. So
Oh,
it's
really?
not yeah, it doesn't really hold its tubular form when it dries. Yeah, so I thought, well, I can't do that, but maybe I can make some cool shapes with it. So I just kind of twisted it into curly cues and um, tied it into those shapes and then hung it to dry. And it dries black. It goes from like a kelp green to a real dark brown black, and it's kind of leathery. So you can kind of leathery, kind of plasticky. You can kind of like pull the forms apart a little bit, but they really hold. They're rigid and stable, but you can kind of flex them like you can plastic. And then I just started kind of playing shrinky dinks with them and kind of linking them together. Um, yeah, they're really cool. Yeah, I mean, this is what I do instead of like doing my laundry, for instance. Yeah, like, "What's for dinner, mom?" "I don't know."
I don't know, but look at
But
this cool thing.
right, "Look at this cool kelp I found."
I love it. So,
Yeah, I mean,
gosh,
it's priorities, right?
oh, yeah, yeah. I wonder what happens if you put it in a hydration chamber.
Mm. Yeah, so I got the kelp over, like, the holidays, and everybody's busy for the holidays. I left it sitting in its box for a little too long, and it did get
Mm.
slimy. Yeah. But I did, yeah. It does okay. It'll stay in the hydration chamber longer than, if you just leave it at room temp, but it will get slimy if you kind of leave it for too long.
Too long, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
interesting. Well, it's always fun to see what you're going to create and what's new in the world of thinking outside the box. That's for sure. I always love that. One of the things too I always love about what you do is you always find. I know obviously with your last book of being all about wearables, and one of the things you're really known for is that just sort of gift you've given us is helping us
Mm.
think these crazy ideas, and actually making them happen. I'm always amazed. I'm kind of curious, where do you see that trend going with wearable kind of flowers and stuff? Because I feel like you're not slowing down with it. And are people still like really? I mean, I feel like is that still really happening a lot, or is it more of an artistic thing?
I don't know. I've, since I started focusing on wearables, I've been entertaining this question. Like, are they out? Are they cool? Are they corny? Are flower crowns passe? Are they back? Are they going away? Like, I think there's always going to be an interest, but I think we just have to kind of follow fashion trends and follow
Right.
art and what we're seeing out in the world and kind of respond and create wearables that speak to what's current right now. I think they'll always have a place. They just have to evolve like everything else
Yeah.
evolves. So, yeah, I think some florists are kind of tired of them. Some florists would never sell a corsage, for instance, and then others seem really excited to make something different and more modern and more innovative or unexpected. So, yeah, I think the public though is like perennial. What's that? How do you say that word? Perennially. I think the public is perennially interested because it's for them always new. They're always shocked. Like a florist
Yeah.
does that. And I
Oh
don't
yeah.
know why they're always shocked, but they are always shocked. It's always
Well,
like fresh and new to them.
right. Well, I think it still amazes me. I was watching something on television, and some fictional movie about a wedding or whatever. Imagine that. And and I sat there looking at the personals, and I'm like, this movie could have been made in the 90s, 80s, 70s. I mean, it's like it's the same thing we've seen for so long. And I think
Hmm.
even though like in our world, we see it more, right? We see a lot more
Oh
of
yeah.
this. But I think in the average consumer's world, they don't see it.
Mm-mm.
So it blows their mind. And I think too, not just that, but I think um I forget what it was. I want to say I watched a reels of yours, and I want to say you were taking the the fluorescence, the inner fluorescence, like what becomes a banana off a banana flower. That
Yes. Uh-huh.
inside there. And you were taking this, and I'm like, what is she gonna do with this? Because they're like nothing. I mean, they're like this little teeny tiny, looks like a chopped onion almost. And and then you were incorporating that into some corsages and wristlet type situations or bracelet type situations. And I just think, I mean, I guess if you have that eye, you just see possibilities everywhere you go.
Mm. Yeah, I think I can thank Francoise Weeks for that. Yeah, I mean, I was meant to meet her, that's for sure. Because like my curiosity and like her enthusiasm and her knowledge just met at the perfect time. And really, I felt changed after I studied with her. This is in 2012, I want to say. Um, I really started to see the natural world in a different way. Like I used to go to bead stores and make jewelry and choose, from thousands of beads and find just the right shape and size and things like that. But after spending time with her, I started looking like at the ground around me as potential.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
She's
it's
a gift to our
yes,
industry. She really
yeah,
is. And we'll have to get her on the podcast again here this year. I know we'll put a link in the show notes going back to that episode because it's so can't tell you how many times I've listened to that episode with her because I don't know, so many of our episodes, that's why we were so glad this year to bring back some of our past guests, just because just catching up and see what's going on. And thank you for bringing her up like that because it's just she's so special.
she
Um,
is.
truly is. Well, I know one of the things I always am amazed about, and I read this too about you recently, and we were just talking about it. Is you think of someone like Sue McLeary, and you think she does all this cool stuff. Now we learn about fabric, and she's using all these neat things to try to innovate, and she's constantly experimenting, and all of this stuff. And you're looking at me because you're like, where's he going with this? And and I think, but yet you continue to invest in yourself in education. and you think, so why does Sue need to do that? And I'd love to hear kind of why you keep doing this and why it's important to you,
Mhm.
because so many times I think people feel like they know it all, or they've reached this plateau, and it's
Mm.
like, I don't know, the importance of investing in yourself, I guess.
Yeah. So, gosh, um, I think I think from the very moment that I fell in love with forestry, like almost 20 years ago, I realized that I had found something that is a legitimate art form, just like painting, like sculpting,
Sure.
like ceramics. But I felt that the larger culture didn't recognize it as such, and I just always felt like I was pushing against this popular opinion that floristry means this, that it's just this service, kind of low skill, low wage kind of endeavor, and it's not something that you can really, it's not a like a visual art form as legitimate or as important or as worth exploring than the other, recognized fine arts.
Right.
And so I always kind of felt defensive of floristry and really curious to see what's possible within the medium. So from the start, I just started, you know, searching online, finding books, studying with whoever I could to try to just kind of grasp what this is all about, like the history. There's such a rich history,
Yes.
and it's global. There's traditions that are incredibly fascinating, and I haven't even scratched the surface of finding out about all of these different traditions. So I kind of have this little, needling need to demonstrate that floristry is more than maybe popular, opinions think it is. And it's been so incredibly gratifying to me personally. I see myself as an artist. I couldn't even say that until recently, because I felt like if I say I'm an artist as a florist, people will kind of scoff or like, who does she think she is? Um, so it's been like a journey of me being more vocal and demonstrating that floristry is more than maybe people think. And to do that, yeah, I've purposely put myself next to people like Francoise and Hitomi and Gregor Lurch. And, I go to the AIFD conference because their presentations, they always include fascinating people.
Yes.
The one in Chicago coming up in July, Ellie Lynn will be there. Ellie Lynn is an amazing master florist with, gosh, 30 years maybe or more of experience. And people here just don't even know those names. And I
Right.
feel like I have to do my part to like crack open, what we think a florist is and say those names and like go to those events um and explore my curiosity and share the findings that I hope are helpful and study. So I'm taking a master course right now, hosted by the Borma School, the Borma Institute in Netherlands.
Hmm.
Gregor Lurch is offering now International Master Florist certification is what it's called. And yeah, I didn't feel prepared technically because I'm not a master florist. I don't have the technical skills, but I jumped in and they accepted me. So now in March I go for the second half and there's a test and I I hope to pass. But honestly, even if I don't pass, I'm I'm thrilled with what I've learned so far. For me, it's not, I don't have to tell people that I'm a master florist or certified. It's not that. It's finally having the time and the opportunity, because these programs are hard to find, to study in this way.
Sure. So it's a two part. What was the first part?
Yeah, so it's a two-part certification program. We went in November for, I believe, 12 days, and there's
Wow.
lecture every day. And then at the end of each day's lecture, there's kind of an assignment. So you absorb all of this amazing knowledge, and then you're expected to kind of, make a do something with it,
Apply.
apply physically. And then we have a critique after everybody's done. So each person puts their piece on a podium and we talk about it. That part is so helpful because you get to see how everybody interpreted the lecture and what techniques they chose to use and what forms they created and how they balanced things. And it was just fascinating. So that was 12 days. And then now we have a few months break at home to do some homework and learn nomenclature. So we have to memorize, the botanical names of, I think, maybe 300 um, different plants and flowers. And then we go back for 10 more days, more lecture, more hands-on practical time, and then we have a test at the end.
And how long is that test?
I believe it's 5 hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. There's the written nomenclature portion, and then I think we have to make three um, designs.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, what is that like to put your work on a pedestal for other people to critique? Because that would to me would be really hard.
It's totally fine because
Yeah.
Gregor is so lovely and
Uh,
everybody is there to learn. Even if your thing fell apart, you still put it on the pedestal and you still talk about your intention, what techniques you used, what went wrong, what you would do next time. It seems like it should be really intimidating. It was fascinating. It was fascinating. Yeah. It was kind of like Project Runway, which I'm obsessed with. But
so
nobody wins at the end of the, day.
nobody gets
Everybody wins.
nobody has to sashay away or anything like that.
No.
So
Nobody cries. Yeah.
Oh wow. And especially, I'm sure with your love of fabrics now or creating fabrics, that's kind of interesting. Well, anyway, well, that's really awesome. I feel like so many times, and I know um, this year having been to AIFD symposium, I saw so many things, and I know um, just to kind of it's like I've had the opportunity a couple times to be the fly on the wall watching this creative process, and I see so much work and so much time go into some of these pieces, and I think, how do we and I've asked this before on the podcast, but I'm curious what your thoughts are. How do we go from this bringing artistry down to everyday sort of design work and
Hmm.
that added value that you can bring, and I'm curious what your take is on transitioning that, because I feel like so many times people, they just dismiss it immediately,
Hmm.
thinking, well, people won't pay for that, I can't, they make all these excuses, which in their mind are real and they're valid, and I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this because I I really respect and love the hardworking everyday florist. The person who might say that's not practical. I can't sell that. I'm too busy. Like I totally understand that person. I've been there. Um, and I respect it. I do. What I think just like fashion, just like chefing, there's there's avenues to travel, and there's like a spectrum of what you can do in any profession. I feel like the master florist techniques, some of them are incredibly time consuming, but then, think about a restaurant like Noma that, Renee Redzepi is like a brilliant mad scientist chef. And not everybody will be interested in being that every day, but everybody might buy his book or everybody might, take, a lesson of his or a recipe of his and apply it to their everyday repertoire. I just think there's real value in exploring these techniques and having people who are devoted to preserving, this knowledge. um, so that like the full richness of our profession just stays alive. I
Sure.
like Gregor when he was lecturing from time to time, he would say, I know this isn't practical. I know you're going to say it takes too long. I know. And he was kind of apologetic about it. And after a few times hearing that, I had to like speak up and say, no, this is worth time. Like this craftsmanship is worth the time um, to teach. It's worth the time to preserve. Um, there's just something, I guess, so like a pride. Like I just have a lot of pride in that.
Mm,
That
I like that.
that yeah, a master florist. My definition is someone who can create an entire floral composition just with their hands. So they're not reaching for a vase, they're not reaching for chicken wire, they're not reaching for any of that. They have the skill and knowledge to make a incredible artful composition just with their hands. So that's so exciting. And I even if you don't think you would make some of these armatures or things in your everyday flowering, I think it's still um, valuable for us to like keep this master florist thing afloat so that, we just don't lose some of these traditions and just don't lose like the full like picture of what floristry can be. I sound
Well,
so sappy. I
no,
sound super sappy.
I really appreciate this actually, and I think this makes me think back to the interview we did with Shane Connolly when we
Hmm.
focused on Constant Spry,
Hmm.
and the reason why that is in the in the act of becoming sustainable as florists and as trying you're experimenting, kind of bring that back, the experimenting you've done to try to find different things, natural items that can be useful. I feel like in the same vein or the same tone, these skills, these things are things that go back way farther than floral foam, for example.
Hmm.
And even though there's a lot of people who don't even remember a time before that
Hmm.
and can't imagine a world without it, but yet these kind of armatures and structures and things that you can build add so much value, I think. And yes, there's the preservation of the techniques and skills, which I think are important because
Hmm.
there may be a day, it's so funny, when I don't know if I should say this, but here I go. But you think about the day when we went from paper bags at the grocery store to plastic bags, and now we're going back to paper because they're compostable, and or more, and even they say like the shopping bags you can purchase to reuse and repurpose. Even once they end up in a landfill, it takes a million years to decompose. So my point is sometimes we end up going back to the old ways because there was value we might not have appreciated at the time because
Hmm.
something new came along that was maybe seemed to be more efficient or more time worthy, and here we are and going back to that is just it's just a good thing.
Yeah.
Plus, so many of these things that you create you can reuse. It's
Oh,
not,
definitely.
I mean, they're built with really great integrity and structure, and it's not. We have to get out of this disposable mindset, I think.
I think so too. Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. I really can't like think about floristry as not an art. So, some people say, well, I'm not an artist. I am a service provider that makes X for, a lot of people really quickly. That's totally fine. But there's a whole world of floristry that we just don't talk about that much. Think about like the World Cup coming up in
Yes.
Manchester this September. Um, Most people that I talk to have never heard of the World Cup. They don't know that there is such a competition. They haven't heard of the Europa Cup. They haven't heard of all the competitions that happen in the US that build up to that, to those competitions. Um, there's just a lot to explore, just like any profession. There's a lot of richness, there's a lot of innovation, there's fascinating techniques. Yeah, it's just it's just really fun to like nerd out and explore.
That's funny. I love that. That's so true. Well,
Yeah.
you mentioned something earlier, and I hope it's okay that we talk about this. And you were talking about, you mentioned defending floristry,
Yeah.
and I remember a conversation that you had on social media, um, and you and I have to admit, you stepped on my toes a few times because you said it's all good. You said a few things, and I'm like, oh, I'm guilty of saying that too. Oh my gosh! And I don't. Do you remember this topic? I'm sure you do. You're not. For those of you that aren't watching this on YouTube, yes, she's shaking her head very adamantly. And I feel like so many times we get caught in these vicious cycles that we end up diminishing what we do and devaluating
Yeah.
what we do. And then we turn around and we're like, we can't charge this for this because we don't feel. And I'm like, well, that's because you've already been self talking to yourself.
Hmm.
Anyway, so I'm going to just let you go get on your soapbox and talk about this because I know I needed to hear it. And if I needed to hear it, I know other people have needed to kind of hear what you were talking about back then.
Yeah. So this goes back to when I started. Okay. So I was a late bloomer, and I'd
No
always
pun
been,
intended.
yes, always been artistic, always been curious, like I've said, but I never felt like I never found a thing that I was really good at. And so when I found floristry, like I said earlier, I completely like found my thing. I'm like, this is my thing. Thank God. This I found my thing, because I was really concerned about that actually. Um, and then started to kind of feel like, okay, there's something in the culture. Like my parents are telling me I shouldn't do this. My friends are saying, what are you thinking? There's something about floristry. I don't know if it's that it's always been a service profession, so it hasn't had the respect I think it deserves, or maybe it's been mostly a female profession, so maybe it hasn't, had the like weight,
Acknowledgement.
acknowledgement, yes, that it deserves. But I felt like there's something in the culture telling florists that they are here to, fill an order, not to express themselves through their medium. And I really kind of felt, I felt disappointed by that. And so when I started to, take classes and talk to other florists and kind of travel around and try to like get my bearings, and, I was in the workshop world, learning my craft, I started to see um, that many of the people teaching at these workshops and events were also saying these kind of limiting beliefs that I had heard
Hmm.
from the larger culture. Things like, oh, it doesn't take any, there's nothing to it. Florists just wing it. Florists just fly by the seat of their pants.
It's not
I don't
brain
know.
surgery.
It's not brain surgery. I don't know what I do, why I do what I do. I just use my intuition. Um, and I left these teaching environments feeling like, okay, I don't have the right intuition. I'm not cool enough. I'm not skilled enough. I just don't have it. Um, it's like a mix of like limiting beliefs that were coming out, like oversimplifying our craft or diminishing our craft. And then there was another kind of strain of um of like information I was getting that was telling me that there's nothing to it. You just have it or you don't. And so I started to kind of make this document because I'm a weirdo. And it turned into a document called Seven Stifling Statements. And I I it's like it's in my Google Docs. It's been almost published many times. I keep retracting because I don't want anybody who reads it that teaches floristry to feel badly about their approach. I just want, if I do share it, what I intend is that people take some time to really digest the art principles that are present in any visual art form, and and kind of recognize that they have to give the student sitting in the chair some meat to be able to grab onto, so that that student can then go back to their studio and make the things that they dream in their head. Like, they have to have some practical tools, some principles, some steps, some insights. If you tell someone, I just designed, based on my intuition, like, that doesn't give the student anything that they can grab onto. So they end up leaving that situation feeling like, well, I'm never going to be able to achieve what I want to achieve. I'll never be able to actualize the things that I want to actualize because I just don't have it. I don't have the style, I don't have the creativity, but I think all of those things are teachable. I think we have all of that like latent ability in us. We just have to be given some framework to explore that will help us like actualize and you know become artists. I'm getting so many texts right now. Let me get rid of this phone. It's really distracting. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Um, I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly, but
Well, how do you think? Let me ask this: being aware of this self-talk, as
mhm.
I think is part of the issue. But how do you how do people get over that? How do people sort of transform those thoughts into better thoughts?
Yeah, I can only speak for myself. What I did was I really sat down and thought, like, why am I a florist? What is it about this profession that fills me like it does? What am I trying to communicate through this work? What am I getting from this work? What am I hoping to offer others? And getting really clear on those answers. And for me, like going back, I mean, this is the same theme we've touched on a number of times. For me, it's to demonstrate that floristry is an art, a legitimate art form, like all of the other visual arts, because I bucked against that when I started, and I was really disappointed by that. And the second thing is to pique the curiosity of the public so that they, have a more elevated view of what floristry is. So those are my two kind of driving things: to express myself as an artist, encourage florists to see themselves as artists, and then also to kind of pique curiosity and make the public more curious about floristry to kind of elevate our profession generally. So with those two things in mind, um, I can really stay kind of in a positive headspace and like a more constructive headspace. But it took a long time. I mean, it really took a very long time. Um, but I struggled a lot early on. I mean, I did weddings on my own for 11 seasons. I worked in a retail shop for several years. I freelanced for other people. But what I finally did when I kind of reached a level of frustration and maybe a level of like finally kind of maturing a little bit and like listening to what I actually am curious about, that's when things started to change for me. When I thought, I love this profession, but I don't love these aspects of it. Let me like focus and put blinders on, focus on what I'm curious about and what fills me up and kind of go wholeheartedly in that direction. Um, I got some self-help books that helped. But yeah, the self-talk stopped when I defined, what is it? Why am I doing what I'm doing? What is the nugget? Um, what does it all mean? Why am I spending my time in this profession? For what reason? and then started kind of moving very decidedly in that direction. That stopped the self-talk.
Well, and
Yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head where it has to be, there has to be an awareness, and then there has to be a choice to, kind of recognize it and try to put that work in to change that. Um and and like I admitted at the beginning of this part of our talk, it was, there were things I said, and
Mhm.
a lot of times. And I think, it's interesting because I think back to me saying some of those phrases. Often it was the result of product. I'm just going to think of a story here. For example, there might have been a very rare flower, a very hard,
Mhm.
let's say lily of the valley. When lily of the valley is in season and beautiful, it is amazing. But when it's not
Mhm.
really in season, it can be a struggle for people.
Yeah.
And we used to have more domestic growers of it, and there used to be more European growers of it, so there was more availability than there is today, in my opinion. But if everyone has done their job perfectly, but yet it sits in an airplane too long, or it's July, or and it's hot, or whatever, and you get to the point where you open that box and it's like it's fried.
There's nothing you can do.
There's nothing you can do. And so that's one of those
No.
moments where I'm like, okay, no one's dying today. And there's,
Oh, yeah,
this
yeah.
isn't brain, you have to find a way to kind of put it in perspective.
Mhm.
And that's hard sometimes. That's really, really hard. And I found myself saying a lot of these phrases because I'm just like trying to rationalize, but it was still a big deal. It is a big deal to
Mhm.
somebody because that was perhaps the bride's bouquet.
Mhm.
And yeah.
Yeah, I think we say these things. I mean, I'm gonna have to share the document now because it's not gonna make a lot of sense for people that haven't read it. But yeah, we say these things to, like lessen tension, to keep things in perspective, to lighten the room, to ease stress, those kinds of things. The not, it's not brain surgery, it's not rocket science. That one's not top of my list of the things that bother me. The things that really bother me is when a person, sometimes a teacher, doesn't demonstrate the richness of floristry, where they kind
Mm,
of like skim off all the good stuff that can really help a student or really communicate the richness of the medium. And they kind of boil it down so it's very, very uninspiring, or very, just doesn't communicate all of the goodness within it that you can explore. And just like any art, there's principles of design, there's theory, there's just fascinating concepts, there's techniques that we can explore. So I wonder myself, do people burn out, or people get turned off
yeah.
when they're not given like a window into what's possible? Do they think like this is all it is, just making the same things every weekend for similar clients, and in white and blush or whatever, like that's not all there is. There's, like any art form, there's so much to explore. So that's when I get really frustrated, when it's just not talked about, or it's kind of like not even explored. I guess a lack of curiosity just makes me insane, because I don't know, I can't think that way.
No, and
Curiosity is so important to me.
hmm. It's interesting because I think of people like yourself that have been on our podcast before, and that's a driving force in so many
Mhm.
of these gifted artists like yourself. And I think too that, I don't know. I feel like, there is a world out there, and I'm glad you said that because I know that, during the pandemic, those people who have been following along with the podcast the whole time, that there was a semester where I was teaching at a community college,
Mhm.
And I see these students, and I'm kind of like, and I wasn't teaching floristry; it was another horticulture class. But I had the opportunity to. They wanted me to sit in on some of the floristry stuff, and I was there, and the teacher was great. The thing is, though, it's like it's so hard. I think, especially with the younger generation, and now I'm gonna sound like an old person, but I'm like, because everything they see is so fast paced and social
Mhm.
media is so, it's like, we're at the mercy of the algorithm or whatever, but there's this gigantic amazing world of flowers,
Mhm.
and it's more than you see at a grocery store, and it's more
Mhm.
than you see probably at, I'm just going to be nice and say, over half of the wholesalers in the country. I mean, it's just because of their markets and different things, they may or may not be able to do those things. But the thing is there is some amazing stuff out there. I mean,
Mhm.
beautiful, beautiful blooms.
Mhm.
And I don't know. And I think that's what drives me every week. Is to find something exciting and new and fresh, and just like you, I feel like I see what you do with these blooms, and I'm just like, where does what is she drinking when she thinks it
I
just
don't know what I'm
amazes me.
drinking. I don't know.
So,
I feel grateful that I have a job where I can, essentially like mad scientist in my studio. Yeah, very thankful.
well, since it's been a couple years since you've been on the podcast, I think, and
Hmm.
you lots happened in those couple years for you. I'm
Yeah.
curious if you have any new advice or any thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners.
Oh gosh. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess I just always encourage people to really tap into why they're doing what they're doing, why they started doing this work, and really, if they're comfortable, embrace the title of artist. And an artist is someone that creates work that evokes emotion in others,
Mm,
usually visual work, and that's exactly what we do. So I just encourage you to like really try to hone your unique creativity and think about what you want to communicate with your work and kind of operate from there. It doesn't mean that you don't make the wedding the way the person wants the wedding, but if you allow yourself to really like hone in your style, hone in what it is that you're hoping to do with your work, and you kind of put it out there, you will start to more quickly get requests to do work that you want to make.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, like really, really kind of accept the title of artist would be number one. Hone your craft, um, make work that really excites you and keeps you curious and keeps you fired up, and then create every opportunity to share that so that people can start to see what it is that you do that's unique. Um, yeah, I wish I had done that. It takes confidence, it takes experience, and I think if you're starting out new, there's like 3 to 5 years where I think most people feel very unsure of their skill and their style, even. Some people just from the start have like a brilliant style and like a focus, but I think that's fairly rare. So just be gentle with yourself while you're figuring it all out. But as soon as you kind of tap into what it is that you want to do with this work, I say like really just like a chef would or just like a painter would, really
yeah.
try to communicate that singular vision and you'll get the work that you want eventually.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah.
so, okay, so flowers for all. We can. Is there a place you recommend we go to pre-order our book?
Yeah. So if you just go to my website, there's a link menu there, and there's a lot of different options for people based on where they live. Yeah, there's some independent bookstores listed there as well. Or you can just go to the Amazon. That's fine too. And I'll be sharing a lot. If you're on my newsletter, I'll be sharing a lot of news about the pre-order giveaways. And on Instagram, I'll share there as well. And I can give you a link, Scott, so that people can enter the giveaway if they choose. But yeah, a totally free class with no strings will be for everybody who pre-orders. And then anybody who pre-orders will also be entered to win one of the garments.
How fun. Such fun.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Sue, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much. I hope I wasn't too sappy or too corny. I hope I made sense. And if you want that document, the 7 stifling statements, so that it makes more sense for people when they're listening, I can share it with you.
Oh, that'd be
Just
great.
don't judge me too much. I share with love.
I love that. Share with love. I love that.